this is going to be a presentation about Franklin computers. So we'll move on to the agenda. So we're going to go over the company history, a quick timeline of the main items on their product lines, some brief words about the collection that I brought today, the print ads, and then we'll talk about VTech Laser 128 as well as another one. So the company history, the whole thing started really with this guy here, Joel Shusterman. Joel Shusterman was the owner of several computer retail stores in the Philadelphia area. And in the late 70s, early 80s, it started to do a lot of retailing of Apple computers as well. And initially, he really liked Apple Computer, he liked their business practices, he liked their products, and he sold a lot of those. He was one of the most successful retailers of computers at a time where computer retail stores were not necessarily very common. Eventually, his relationship with Apple kind of soured. He felt that Apple, unfortunately did not take care of its retailers. They would really help in naming anybody as a distributor in a way to basically work around the retailers. And it started to become very disillusioned with Apple as a company, but still really enjoyed their products. So one thing led to another, and Joel Shusterman sold all of his computer retail stores in the Philadelphia area, probably made a lot of money in the process, and then ended up with a lot of money on his hands and wanted to find out, he was still a fairly young guy, what he was going to do with all of that. So he got together with a couple of fellows of his, and they decided to try to do a better Apple computer. I mean, they had a lot of experience with Apple, obviously the price was very high, and they thought they had some ideas on how to improve it. So they got together a couple of guys, they found some venture capitalists at the time, people that were professors at the University of Pennsylvania, had some deep pockets, put some money into that as well, and they eventually put together the ACE 100. The ACE stands for Apple Computer Emulator. So those guys, from the get-go, were very clear about what they were trying to do. Now, the ACE 100 was a carbon copy of the Apple II. In a lot of respects, they copied the ROM, they copied the hardware, and the thing was literally almost 100% compatible with the original Apple II. There were even discussion of them copying the motherboard layouts. I mean, it was a blatant infringement of what could have been copyrights at the time. So they put 2,000 units together initially and showed up at the Apple Fest show in Boston and thought that they were going to be able to go into the Apple Fest show and display the ACE 100 computers. They didn't let them in, right? And so what those guys did, to give you an idea of how they did business at the time, they set up their stand on the sidewalk outside of Apple Fest, and they brought in a bunch of girls, in bikinis, to sell the ACE 100 computers. So they sold a bunch of them out there. Their names got to be known, and they started really the Franklin ACE company, and they did extremely well. Initially with the S100. Very quickly after that, as you can imagine, Apple did not let that slide. And here there's a very rare picture, actually, that Bob Applegate, the software engineer, provided, where you see Steve Wozniak right here and Joel Shusterman in an argument at a conference. Yeah. And apparently the story is that those two were arguing about the fact Woz wanted Shusterman to admit that they had blatantly copied the layout of the motherboard and other things, and they were having those public arguments at the conference. But I think he wanted to hear him say it and make sure that he admitted that. So at that point, Apple opened a lawsuit and started a lawsuit against Franklin. Now, this is at a time where the legal system around copyright infringement was not what it is today. And the story goes that the judge who was ruling on the matter asked Apple to provide a computer and asked Franklin to provide a computer so that he could compare the two computers. Apparently, Apple was a little hard-nosed about it and said, okay, here's the computer, but you can only have it for a week, Judge. Then we take it back. And they just provided the computer, apparently no monitor, no accessories, nothing like that, just the box. Franklin, on the other hand, donated the computer to the judge with all the accessories, the monitor, the joystick, and they will just take as much time as you want. So the judge said, okay, fine, no infringement. Franklin, you're okay to pursue. Now, Franklin apparently did not want to win that case. What they thought they would happen is that they would lose the case and they would be able to license the technology from Apple. They felt that it would be better for them to do that so that it protected the US market for all the Asian clones that could have been coming onto the market. So in a way, Franklin wanted to create an issue, but wanted to resolve the issue through licensing and not just through winning the case, which now opened the door for a bunch of other clone companies to come onto the market. So eventually, though, Apple, went to the Court of Appeal, appealed the decision from the judge, and they eventually won the court case. So Franklin had to pay, $2.5 million in penalties, but a lot of the decisions that were made at the time did not prevent them from staying in the market. So on the tail end of that, they came out with the ACE 1000. The ACE 1000, that was in '83, was a clone of the Apple II Plus, and in a lot of ways was superior to the Apple II Plus. And I will show you later what they claim as some of the traits of superiority that the ACE 1000 had. The ACE 1000 then went through a couple of variations. There was the ACE 1100, which was an ACE 1000 with a one floppy drive integrated in it, and then the ACE 1200, which we have here, which is an ACE 1000 with dual floppies integrated in it as well. And then, unfortunately, Franklin went a little crazy, the Franklin Computer Company. A lot of the early management was kind of pushed out to different jobs. They hired a CEO from another company. That CEO started hiring a bunch of, top wigs from other company that were paid very large amounts of money. They started throwing crazy parties and spending money, like buckets of money left and right, to the point through mismanagement and wasteful spending that they had to file for Chapter 11 protection of bankruptcy. So those guys went through kind of a crazy phase where unfortunately they could not manage their success and started running into some financial problems. Eventually, changes happened within the company. They were able to recover from that and also started to do a lot of clean room engineering of the Apple ROM. So instead of doing blatant copies of Apple ROM or copying large portion of Apple ROM, they started doing a proper reverse engineering and clean room development. And they came out with a new generation of product, including the Franklin ACE 500, which you have there, which is a clone of the Apple IIc, and that then was then followed by the ACE 2000 series, which was a clone of the Apple IIe. The 2000 series also came out just like the 1000 series with a 2000, 2100, and 2200, depending on the number of drives that you have. So I just kind of provided a bit of a timeline of how things developed. So in early 1982, this is when the ACE 100 came out. The ACE 1000 was actually those things fold themselves very rapidly, which is amazing to me. When you look today at the development life cycle that we have for hardware and software, where things take sometimes years in development, back then you could literally come out with a new computer in a matter of a couple of months. So they actually bought the case from a manufacturer in Pennsylvania that was already producing those cases for another computer company, and like that they could just grab a box from the assembly line, put their motherboard in it, and be out to market extremely quickly. So the first court case came out in May of '82. They had some activity with the 1000 series again in March of '83, specifically the 1100 and the 1200. This is when Apple won the appeal. That was in August '83. So you can see, I mean, the timeline looks long, but those things are really flowing very quickly. You know, you have basically a year and a half that spans this kind of range here. You can see that soon after that, through probably the appeal, the wasteful spending, they go through a bankruptcy court. Okay, at that point, they start reverse engineering a lot of clean room development of the ROM, and they come out in '85 with the ACE 500 and the ACE 2000. A little later, in '87, they come out with the ACE 2100 and 2200, and after that, by 1988, Apple was able to force them out of the computer market altogether. And they didn't sell a single computer after that, and they went to those little translator pieces of electronics, you know, little gadgets and things like that. That's kind of where they went. In a lot of ways, like what VTech did. When VTech got out of the computer market, they went into a lot of the little gadgets and electronics. There was a statement that was made by Wozniak here in 1982 about Franklin. He said it's just a total copy. If anyone at Apple did something like that, we tried to put them in jail. So you can imagine Apple was very frazzled by this blatant copying of their hardware. And not only just that, but Franklin was rubbing their nose into it. And when you look at the print ads, it's comparative advertising. It's like sweeter than Apple. You know, they were really rubbing their nose into it, obviously going in at a much cheaper price. So I presented here the three members of my collection. So in chronological order, I first acquired the 2200, which is an Apple IIe clone that came out in 1987 for the price at the time of roughly $1,000. This is still a 6502 type processor. It came with 128K of RAM that you could max out to 576. It has composite and RGB video output, and you will see that actually in the 500 as well. It came with two internal floppy drives, and then its own operating system called Franklin DOS. And Franklin DOS, what allowed you to do, you see you have like function keys, allowed you to program the function keys of the keyboard, and so on. So the ACE500, that's the Apple IIc clone. We've got it here also. It's actually a very attractive computer in terms of the look. That was in 1987. I could not find the introductory price on that. It came originally with 256K. Javier actually upgraded his to 512.
Yep.
Also composite and RGB outputs, one single internal 5.25-inch drive, FDOS, and then, as we said, an Apple IIc. And then this is my latest acquisition. This is the ACE1200 from 1983. That one retailed initially for $2,200. Also 6502 at 1 megahertz, 128K, which is really actually 64K on the motherboard and 64K on the Z80 processor card that it has. Now, why two drives? So you mentioned this is the same as the ACE1000, then 1100 was one drive, and the 1200 is two drive. The reason why they did that is because Joel Schusterman, the guy I showed you earlier, got a super deal on drives and bought like a few thousand drives. And he had them all in a warehouse. But people were not buying the ACE10 floppy drives. Usually people either already had drives or they were buying drives from other manufacturers, and he had a really hard time selling his drives. He said, well, let's go ahead and redesign the top case. Let's put a couple of drives in there. Came up with a new model, priced it right, and he started selling his drives through the sale of the ACE1000 computers. So that's why you see those actually built in there. And the only thing they had to do was really redesign the top cover. The rest of the computer is identical to an ACE1000. Now, what's really neat about the 1200 though is it came out of the box with 4 cards in it that were fairly expensive cards. It came number 1 with obviously a floppy drive controller. Number 2, it came with a video card that did the 80 column as well as the uppercase, lowercase. So now you've got the controller, you've got the video card, you've got a dual interface card that's built in that does parallel and serial connection. And then the big thing is that they included a Z80 card that they called the Ace 80 that had a Z80 processor on it and an extra 64K of RAM on it. If you try to buy those cards separately, I was looking at a magazine of the time, like the Z80 card was $300 just for that in the early 80s. So you add hundreds of dollars worth of cards that were built into the machine along with 2 drives. So that was actually a fairly good package. It came obviously with all the software for those things like the CPM Basic, the CPM Utilities, all of that came when you bought the Ace 1200. Now here I just put what I call kind of the extra goodies. You know, I looked at some of the literature, frankly, to kind of see how they were trying to differentiate themselves from Apple. Well, start with the 1200. Now, obviously, we already went over that. You know, the 2 drive, all the cards. Now, this was also claimed to be a lot more reliable than the 2 Plus, just for one reason, is that Franklin put a fan into the PSU, which, as you guys know, Apple always refused to do until Jobs left the company. This one has actually a fan built into the PSU case to cool it down. That was kind of their big reliability feature, and they sold that as being a lot more reliable than the Apple II Plus. And I have to admit, it's very sturdily built. Also, the keyboard, as you can see, this is a full keyboard compared to the 2 Plus, which was not as enhanced, not as extended. A lot of their numeric keypad that you see here had, I'll ask you this, what was the killer app of the time in the early 80s? The business application?
VisiCalc.
VisiCalc, so like a boatload of computers, right?
Yeah.
The way they did, and you will be able to see that on numeric keypad, they had a bunch of VisiCalc shortcuts on there. So they, a lot of VisiCalc functions were built into the numeric keypad as shortcuts. So obviously for the business market. Now the S2200, obviously this is a 2E clone. This one didn't have any illegal code. It had an RGB output, which the 2E did not have natively. You would have had to buy
RGB card.
An RGB card and the RGB monitor, or maybe like a RamWorks 3 with like the RGB extension. There was a lot of things you needed to do for that. Integrated fans, again, reliability. Built-in half-height discs in it. And then, you have to imagine, reposition yourself at the time. This was already kind of a PC look. Detachable keyboard, central unit. So this was going to be a precursor to the look of a lot of the business machines that were going to be coming out right after. The S500, once again, a 2C clone, fully extended keyboard. The 2C would not have had the keypad. Programmable function keys, they kind of like that there. More native RAM than the 2C of the time. And extremely well built. I mean, I know, Javier, you've opened that one up a few times as well. It's a really sturdy built computer. Metal frame.
Has metals over metal, that thing.
Yeah. Very strong, very heavy as well.
Yeah, very heavy.
So this is a couple of the things I've had to do with those machines. That's always the easy one. This one just required a bit of a cleanup, no major fixes. Though this one, when I got it, it didn't travel very well. It was kind of a mess, but luckily it was functional. I still had to, the power light was popped out, had to find a replacement power light. The keyboard is garbage on those. They use the capacitive foam pads that are used by Lisas, by a number of different computers. The foam disintegrates over time.
Yeah.
Mine were not completely disintegrated, they were just kind of distended. Instead of being nice and compact, they were long and, and soft. So those are the Keytronic keyboards. They don't age well. So I found a company in Texas called TexElect that actually manufacture replacement foam pads, and you can buy a whole set for $25 for your computer. Now it's tedious work. You have to take all the keyboard out, you need to pop out every single foam pad, you need to put
Clean
because
it.
it has kind of a plastic disc at the bottom that needs to be inserted into the key. But it's very Zen-like. You know, if you do that, it's can be fun. You know, I had to do some cleaning. The monitor was all messed up, but now it's in perfect working condition until what was that, yesterday or day before yesterday, where the refa blew up in the PSU, and it still smells pretty smoky right now. And then the ACE500, you know, defective key switches. Those are the famous Futaba MA41 key switches underneath the keyboard. Hard to find, very clicky. And what's funny is that they click on, you know, on release. So when you push it down, it doesn't click. On release, it clicks. But they're kind of hard to find. And I was looking everywhere for replacement key switches, could not find them until I found that some kind of Samsung Novell keyboard was using the same key switches. Found the keyboard on the island of Cyprus, of all places. Bought the keyboard, had it shipped over, and the harvesting key switches. So with that, I was able to do a repair of the keyboard. That did well. And then the PSU, when I got this, it didn't come with the you know, the PSU, the original PSU of the machine. So what I ended up doing, I kind of copied one of the modifications that Javier made to his, is that it's actually, we put an internal PSU into it. There's plenty of space in the case for the internal PSU. It has a space for it, yeah. Yeah, plenty of space, but they decided to make it external. Yep. So the modification that you'll see on that one, I've made an internal PSU in the unit by leveraging an Apple IIc Plus internal PSU. With the added advantage that this one will support anywhere between 120 to 220 volts. So it's international now, which is great. And that was about it. So here are some of the printed ads that I wanted to bring to your attention. So you can see, obviously, who they're comparing, you know, a little subliminal message there. You know, obviously Ben Franklin, the origin of the name here. This is what they call as the big reason to buy an ACE1200. Apple II compatible, first line item, you know. CPM, 120K of RAM, built-in floppy drive, disk control, 80 column card, serial interface, parallel interface, upper and lower case, VisiCalc keys were presented as well. Cursor control pad, numeric pad, and auto repeat keys, all of which the Apple II Plus lacked at the time. This is the ACE 1000. Again, it's the same thing, except as you can see here, that it was a regular lid compared to the double drive lid on it, and different ads. How open can you be about the comparative advertising? What's sweeter than an Apple? And Apple right on there, and this is for the ACE 100. Very attractive computer. You know, kind of a black top on it, and I think it's a good looking computer there as well. Very retro looking. I'm not going to say much about this because Javier bought a VTech laser. VTech went through, you know, the 128, the 128EX, the 128EX2, which Javier has here today. Then they kept the same case and even had a PC compatible initially in the same case. One of the things they did well is specifically summarized here. They reverse engineered the Apple Monitor ROM using a clean room design approach rather than simply copying it. And they also licensed an Applesauce Basic compatible version of Microsoft Basic. So they walked the thin line that allowed them to remain, quote, legal. Apple went after them, just like they went after Franklin, but Apple could not push them out of the market like they did for Franklin. So as you can see, they were challenged in court, and actually, you know, and the competition kept on going between the Apple IIc and the Apple IIc Plus with the laser, you know, 128, 128EX and EX2. But they stayed in the market a bit longer, but eventually it got out of the market as well anyway.
Mhm.
And Apple continued. So that's it. That's it for the presentation. I just want to show you the machines so you guys can see what they look like. So this one, what I was going to say, that's the one that I presented in terms of some of the changes. I will show you what it has inside and how that was actually structured. So very heavy metal frame. Let me push this off. So you remove the entire lid. So the lid contains the two drive, big metal plates holding this in. So you see the dual interface card here, parallel interface here, serial interface there. Then you've got the video card here that will do the 80 column as well as the upper lower case. This is the Z80 card right here with the extra 64K of RAM on board and the Z80 processor. This is known as the ACE 80 card. And then obviously a simple dual controller card here. Video outputs here so that you can access either color or different formats of C.
That's a nice looking computer.
It's a nice looking computer, right? It's an Apple IIc clone. I'm showing it here with its matching joystick from Franklin. I think it's a good look. And this is the monitor that it was usually advertised with. So this is just a regular monochrome monitor, but I can take the monitor from the ACE 2200, which is a color RGB, plug into the color RGB in here. Actually, you can actually run both monitors at the same time. You can have the monochrome and you can have the RGB, so you look like a trader of the early 80s with a dual screen setup. 5.25 inch drive on the side, like the 2C of the